So the next step after we've aspirated these mares, you guys have cleaned the oocytes, is they come to Genetech, to the lab. And that happens a lot of different ways depending on where these mares are at in the country. It can be it's solo, they get on the truck with you guys. Sometimes they get on an airplane to come here. And so regardless of how they get here, those oocytes arrive at the lab. And then I'd like you to tell us what the next steps are. When they come through this door right here, then what?
What happens? Okay, so to touch on what happens next in the aspiration process, or the 𝗄𝗵𝗁 process, is what happens with these oocytes once they arrive here. So first and foremost, kind of the most critical thing for these oocytes is regulating their temperature. So these oocytes are packaged in a little vial, a 2 ml vial, with special media to basically keep them alive. But then what they're packaged in is really important. So we here at Genetech have transport incubators that they're basically battery-powered incubators that hold these oocytes at 22 degrees Celsius.
And I'm gonna stop you there. So I've heard you guys or people say like, we're trying to make these oocytes believe they're still in the uterus or an ovary, right, I guess, technically. So is that what those incubators do? And that media, is it trying to kind of make those oocytes think they're still in a mare?
Basically, yes. I mean, I will say, so the temperature is actually lower than body temperature. So like embryos, we ship at body temperature, 37 degrees Celsius. We actually cool these oocytes a little bit because it basically will kind of like, I don't know if neutralize is the best word, but just like keep them steady from either progressive, but the media we send them in, for sure, it gives them, it's basically giving them some energy to survive. It's like mimicking the follicular fluid that housed that oocyte before. Okay, perfect. So we put them in the transport incubators, or, you know, here at Genetech, it's not just our veterinarians that aspirate. We have veterinarians all over the country that aspirate as well, and we'll use our facility to do the 𝗄𝗵𝗁 procedure. So those veterinarians, one, can either call Genetech and we can send them one of those transport incubators to have on hand for when they aspirate, and then they can put the oocytes in there and ship it to us, which either they get, those incubators get shipped overnight, or sometimes we're in a little bit more rush or crunch situation where, they get put on a plane and flown here. So they get here, and the next step is we hand this all over to our lab, to our embryologists. So these embryologists are trained in this field of how to handle these eggs and how to fertilize them. So they take the eggs and they put them into petri dishes, again with special media to help keep them alive and like mimic.
Convince them they're the chosen ones.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So we put them in, and you know, if you ever go through this process, we call it maturation. We'll put these oocytes to maturation. So it's basically putting them in a petri dish. Again, all of this is the temperature is very controlled in our lab, as well as the incubators that they go into. But they're put into media that will mature them. So in essence, kind of becoming like a mature, what we would have called, you know, following your mare, a mature follicle. So basically preparing those eggs for fertilizing.
So basically the way I want people to understand this, because this is how it clicks for me, is instead of just getting to mature one, typically sometimes two, if we're lucky and we have a mare that likes to double ovulate, in that mare's ovary, which is where that happens, correct? Correct. Okay, so instead of just getting one or two of those, we get to try to talk all of these into maturing to big enough follicles to be able to be injected with one sperm cell in the lab. And so that's where I think I want people to understand how we can kind of capitalize on all of those oocytes that were otherwise just going to go away with this cycle. Instead of them just going away because one of those follicles became the dominant one, now we get to possibly use multiple to create embryos. So exactly.
And right now I feel like this is a good place to just add in that, so, you know, in human medicine, it's common that females can freeze their eggs. Unfortunately, that's not a thing quite yet in horses. There's a lot of research going on trying to figure out how to just freeze the oocyte, but know, the makeup of these oocytes just is different from other mammals. Like cows, we can do it no problem. Humans, you can do it no problem. Horses, as always, they're just more difficult creatures. We can't quite do it yet. We're trying to get there and figure it out, but so far we can't. So that's one thing, because I have a lot of people ask me that, like, can't we just freeze the eggs and then we'll, you know, fertilize them later? And fortunately, we can't do that yet. So no, we do have to fully take these eggs to the maturation stage, fertilize them, and develop embryos before we can freeze them.
Yep. And to clarify with people, we are interchangeably using oocyte and egg, right?
Yes.
So an embryo is the finished product.
Yes.
An egg or an oocyte will be what we start with before they're injected.
Correct. Correct. Okay, so to go over the timeline of, now we aspirated your mare, have these oocytes. They've arrived here to the lab. So now we're going to talk about that timeline of what does the ICSI process and embryo production look like. So to kind of lay this out, our ICSI, you know, when we actually fertilize these eggs, we call that day 0. So your aspiration process actually occurs, we call day -0, so 2 days before that. So we aspirate your mare, say Monday. Those eggs we'll bring back to the lab, and the lab will take them Tuesday morning and put them to that maturation I was talking about, where they put them in those petri dishes with the special media to help mature them and get them ready for fertilization. And they put them in the incubators and let them sit. So then our day 0, the next day, Wednesday afternoon, is when these eggs that are mature now and look like they survived everything and are ready to be fertilized, get fertilized. So that's day 0.